On today's episode,
back to Jamie's article. The club has been described by Vanity Fair as New York City's hottest freak show.
Allegedly, all this is allegedly for entertainment purposes only. And allegedly, this was a place that, like I said, Epstein potentially funded, frequented, and where certain, illegal Epstein-like activities might have taken place in and at and around the club.
Where Owen Wilson and Kate Hudson once stormed out over a vaudeville act that used a live crying human baby.
They're out in the open now. They're not even trying to conceal it anymore. These people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them. You don't need a formal conspiracy when interests...
Hey guys, we're back with another part of the Epstein Club video by the Conspiracy Files. This is on the club called the Box in New York. Club frequented by and potentially funded by Epstein. And allegedly, all of this is allegedly for entertainment purposes only. And allegedly, this was a place that, like I said, Epstein potentially funded, frequented, and where certain, illegal Epstein-like activities might have taken place in and at and around the club. So we have been making our way through this, documentary by the Conspiracy Files. Link in the description below. Go give their channel a peek. Give them a follow, a join, subscribe, comment. All the credit goes to their channel. Video is about an hour and 44 minutes long, hour 45. We're on minute 10 here. You know me, I talk a lot. But he's essentially walking us through an article on Substack written by a gentleman named Jamie Crawford back in 2026, who basically compiled all of the information, did all the investigative work on this club called the Box. In yesterday's, or the last episode, part 2 of us going through this, we saw some of the original evidence from an article back in 2006, an original blog post on the Gawker website, which, if you're not familiar, Gawker, I don't know if it's still around, but it was like an old school website where you could kind of post like almost crowdsourced, I want to say like celebrity gossip, like Hulk Hogan got busted, I think, for cheating on his wife through Gawker. And there's different things that Gawker has exposed over the years. I did not know about this article, or this post rather, back in 2006. We checked out the timeline. This would have been a couple of months. The original Gawker post would have been a couple of months after Epstein's initial charge for activities with a minor. And so the timeline matches up. He gets charged in July. In September 2006, this Gawker article drops. They also went through an article about the owner, or shall we say the head of the club. I don't know if he's an owner or not, but the guy who runs the joint, named something Hammerstein. Oscar Hammerstein is the grandson, or the guy who did Sound of Music, and this is his grandson, Simon Hammerstein, who runs this club. And there was an article in the New York magazine by Alex French called The Impresario of Smut that dove into details about the club, but it seems like it's mostly on Hammerstein. And this was published in 2008, November 2008. And I think that is, when was Epstein convicted the first time? I think that's after the conviction. Yeah, so the conviction was in June of 2008. The article was written in November 2008. So one of the things we talked about is understanding the timeline helps you understand that whoever is involved at this point is, if they're high level enough, should be at least loosely aware of the optics about associating with a guy with these kinds of charges. In the case of Hammerstein, I think, we briefly glanced at the article last time, and there was actually a lot of positives, comments about him. And I haven't read it, so I could be wrong, but just on a very quick glance, there was people who were saying good things about him. I should read this at some point so I can comment more concretely about it. But I think it's important to I'm glancing at the article right now. Here's a quote from someone saying, "I was harassed every day," says a former performer who referred to Hammerstein's behavior as a sick power thing. So this is so important to make sure that you do the research. One of the points that I called out in the last video was that just on a brief glance, I had seen a couple comments about Hammerstein in that article that seemed to indicate that he was actually like a good figure to some people, and that nuance in these discussions is incredibly important. There is a certain element of guilty by association, but there's also a lot of nuance to that. The Chris Rock involvement in Epstein is potentially one of those cases where he was in the circle and the orbit of Epstein because of some nonprofit work and some humanitarian work. And he got on a flight with a bunch of other people involved in the project and had no idea who this guy was or what he was involved in. So that's always important to keep in mind. However, on second review, it looks like this Hammerstein guy is probably not a good guy and not worth applying that sort of nuanced lens to, because he does appear to be someone who was involved in inappropriate behavior at a bare minimum. It looks like harassment. I was sexually harassed every day, says a former performer. According to an employee, but denied by Hammerstein, he would often tease, "Do you want to F me? Do you want to S my D?" The former performer referred to Hammerstein's behavior as a sick power thing. It's like he was just joking, or what he wanted you to think is he was just joking. So yeah, on further review of this article, not a great guy, clearly. Does it mean he's involved in PDFing, that kind of stuff? The more Epstein-style version of harassment? Not necessarily. And again, everything in this video, whether it's comments from me, comments from the Conspiracy Files, which is the video we're going to watch, or comments straight from any articles, are all 100% alleged and for entertainment purposes only. But again, to revisit the points we made about nuance and these issues being complex, in yesterday's episode in part 2, I want to retract some of that, or put additional context on it rather, and say that in the case of Hammerstein, it's clearly not an issue of nuance here. I think I must have saw one or two quotes by a couple of people who said good things about him. And I imagine if you run a club of this size, you're working with a lot of different people. There's bound to be at least one or two people who say some good things about you. But the harassment stuff is obviously concerning. There's another quote here. It says, "I've been to a lot of degenerate places, and rarely have I seen the level of degeneracy like I've seen at the box. Things have gotten out of hand. The vision seems to have been lost." Yeah. So anyways, all of these things are alleged, as I said. This guy does not seem to be a good guy. It looks like there's more bad quotes than good quotes. But another thing that I wanted to add in terms of contextualizing all of this stuff is to ground it in reality. I think one of the things that, some people who may not live in cities like New York or haven't spent a lot of time in the big city like that, it may be difficult to wrap your head around these kinds of parties happening. And I can just say from personal experience that I have been to clubs where adult activity was happening, where not necessarily of a physical nature, but all kinds of things, of a substance nature, of any number of natures. Nowhere near what we're talking about when we're talking about the box, and certainly not any type of PDF style behavior. No minors were involved. But I've been to clubs where you see things and you go, wow, this is wild, and a lot of that took place in bigger cities. I spent 4 years in New York, and so there are certainly levels to this thing. And what I experienced is on the lowest end of that, probably, right? The part of the experience that anyone can access. Whereas a place like the box is much more restrictive. And so getting in is even a challenge. We look at the box's website, and they require reservations. Their website clearly communicates a culture of elitism where they're not really trying to actively market themselves to the masses. It's clearly a sort of place that you got to know someone to really get in, kind of a deal. At least that's the vibe I'm getting off of it. And that sort of elitism that comes along with restricted access also kind of allows them to really dance on that line of what is, shall we say, an appropriate version of an alternative club where, risque behavior might be going on, and what is cross the line of appropriate versions of this. And it seems like this is that type of club where they were really trying to dance on that line and eventually started to veer off towards the inappropriate and, with someone like Epstein's involvement, the vastly inappropriate, right? And certainly illegal and highly immoral, right? Legality aside, highly immoral, downright evil. When you're talking about PDF style behavior. So a lot here. I think I've said enough for now. My goal really is to just try and provide as much context and be critical as much as possible, both of the content and myself. Obviously, I was wrong about this Hammerstein gentleman, so remaining open-minded to my own biases and opinions, but also trying to call them out in others and provide as much context around this as possible so that we can really sort of analyze it from a critical lens and grounded in reality. So enough of me rambling. Let's jump in. Part 3 of the Epstein Club.
Arithmetically. I hope I said that right. Arithmetically.
I think this is where we
Vibe
ended
multiplied by style divided by how many people you're with.
Arithmetically,
And
I
then
don't
the
know
only
if
other
that's a real
FAQ
word.
is there a dress code?
I gotta look
Your
it up.
answer, there's only one way to find out. ... So that's about all the information about the box that they put out online,
It is a word.
other than,
Yeah, you can
the
kind
fact
of
that you
see
can book
what I mentioned earlier. Like, this is clearly, they don't put a lot of information on their website. They're clearly not marketing it actively. So this is very much a sort of elite version of these types of clubs where you got to know somebody who knows somebody, sort of a thing.
table, fill out a booking form. Back to Jamie's article. He wrote, "The club has been described by Vanity Fair as New York City's hottest freak show, where Leonardo DiCaprio has had condoms emptied upon him, where
This
Susan
is
Sarandon has had vomit spewed
allegedly.
all over her, and where Owen Wilson and Kate Hudson once stormed out over a vaudeville act that used a live crying human baby. Much like a Diddy party, events at the box have been described in terms of increased exclusivity and increased degeneracy as the nights grow later." And this is also, to side note here, this is something that we've talked about many times on this show, and something that I've heard time and time again when it comes to these predator ring parties. Not alleging that that's what's going on at the box. I want to be very clear. I'm not alleging that they're involved in any criminal activity here.
Yeah, I think the Diddy whole situation adds another layer to this onion of what's going on when you look at the bigger picture, when you look at things at scale. If you understand some of Diddy's story, who he kind of came up under, and potentially who he learned these things from. Now, this is all alleged. I don't know this by fact, but there's plenty of documentaries out there, and maybe we'll look at one after this, but that kind of go through Diddy's history and who he was connected to and who it's likely that he learned how to do the Diddy party thing from. And that gentleman, let's just say Zionist, potentially, and happens to have that in common with Epstein, right? So you're seeing a through line there that to me indicates, for lack of a better term, an MO, right? A playbook, right? A lot of these types of organizations, institutions, people, operators have a playbook in which they operate from. And if you can identify the playbook or elements of that playbook, you can map that pattern onto different events or different characters or different narratives and identify kind of who's potentially manipulating the situation in various cases. It's not always the Illuminati's at the end of everything. It's not the wizard behind the curtain every single time, right? In my opinion, I think it's more like Game of Thrones. You have competing forces, and understanding the MOs of different forces to the extent that we can diagnose them is a tool that you can use to identify who's behind certain things. And in the case of Epstein, in the case of Diddy, it certainly seems to be, again, for lack of a better term, a Zionist type of playbook, frankly. So a Mossad type of playbook. So do with that what you will, but it is another layer of the onion in the Epstein story.
With Diddy parties, you know, the thing is, people would show up to these parties and there's a normal-ish party going on the grounds of these parties. You know, you got 1,000 people. There might be some weird things that you see, half-naked people. There might be some bizarre stuff happening in one corner of the main party, but that's not really where the gold was for these people that came to these events looking for that something extra or that something potentially illegal or extra. Within these larger parties, there would always be a much smaller, much more exclusive party.
This is something that a lot of people can probably relate to on a smaller scale. If you just think about parties that you've gone to and everybody's drinking, having a good time, someone may even be, you know, smoking something illicit, some trees, whatever. That's not really a big deal anymore nowadays, frankly. But let's say you happen to have a bag, right? I think we all know what I mean by that. You typically wouldn't just put that out on the coffee table for anyone to have. One, it's more expensive, but two, it's not looked at in the same way. So if anyone who's been to a party who partakes in those types of things kind of knows, typically at your average house party, you're going to go into the bathroom or go into back to your car with your buddy or whatever to partake in that type of thing. So that's an example that we can all kind of relate to, or at least a lot of us can. It's certainly more common to have been exposed to that type of behavior. That is very similar in nature to what he's talking about here, right? So it kind of maps out onto approachable or understandable, more digestible human behavior.
Where the real shit went down. Diddy parties, that's what the woman that I interviewed had to say, that she was at the normal party for a long time. She saw some weird stuff, but then she was basically whisked into this more exclusive room, invite only. You basically had to know someone to get into this area, and that's where she saw the children and the naked people, and the whole thing was like a freak show, orgy, anything goes type of location. And I have personally spoken with victims of some of these predator rings that have described very similar things, where they would be taken to a location where maybe the guy who owned this house or this mansion or chateau, if it's overseas, where they'd be holding a party, people would be dancing, interacting. It seemed kind of normalish, but as it got later and later into the night, those kind of normal people would clear out, and either the main party would shift into this all-out spectacle of debauchery and illegal activity, or the the person, the victim, would be brought into a different room, a different area that was way more exclusive and secretive, and that's where these things would be going on. And so I find it interesting that that's how people have described this nightclub. You know, it's normal-ish for a while and it's still really freaky and weird, but as the night gets later and later and there are areas within the club that are more exclusive, those areas and during those times, that's when the weirder and weirder stuff, allegedly according to people that have been here, starts to go down. I mean, right here, there's a clipping from the Evening Standard, the newspaper, in 2011 that states, "The Box. At 3:30 a.m. on busy weekend nights when the crowd's appetite has not been satiated, the most open-minded guests at the Box are invited upstairs to a room for a private show. What exactly happens in this room is shrouded in secrecy." Don't know what to make of that, but when you look at that through the lens of other lived experiences of survivors, already off to a weird start here. So there are actually some clips here that Jamie has included that we're going to watch along with him. I don't know who this is, but I believe that they're going to be talking about the Box. Let's take a look.
At one point, I emptied a condom on.
Just to add a little bit of context to what that tweet or whatever is in the box, in that white box. Let me see if I can find it again. This right here. At 3:30 a.m., busy weekend nights when the crowd's appetite has not been satiated, the most open-minded guests, remember that part, the most open-minded guests at the Box are invited upstairs to a room for a private show. What exactly happens in this room is shrouded in secrecy. So a lot of the times when I talk about this, we talk about coded language, specifically in relation to the Podesta emails, WikiLeaks, the Pizzagate stuff, and a lot of what we've seen in the Epstein emails. Again, talking about identifying MO, the playbook patterns and being able to apply them across events. Coded language is one of those things. It clearly takes the form of pizza and food in the instance of the emails. Here, we're using the term the most open-minded guests. We don't have a big body of evidence here to suggest that this specifically means something, but it likely does refer to open-minded in a certain way, right? Excuse me. So when we're talking about a club like this, there are likely activities, a number of illicit activities going on throughout the club, throughout the evening, right? The example that I gave where someone gets a bag, this happens at your average dive bar every single weekend. Them needing to hide it in a place like this is far less likely. It's that type of behavior is likely more out in the open. So what, in an environment like that, what does it mean to be open-minded when substances and potentially adult activity, sex, is happening out in the open? What does it mean to be open-minded, right? So I think it's important to ground that specific term in context, because it's I think it's a good term, which was kind of polluted, unfortunately, by all of the woke stuff that's happened over the past decade or so. But a good term for this is a dog whistle, right? So this is a term that is wink, wink, nudge, nudge. People in the know understand what it means, and it allows you to try and identify other like-minded people. An example of this that's very famously known from other illicit communities, specifically the mafia, is a friend of ours, right? We've all seen, movies like The Goodfellas and stuff like that, and they would use language like that. Hey, he's a friend of ours, or he's a friend of mine, right? And those two things meant very different things. A friend of mine just meant some guy who's a friend, he's friendly to me. But when you said a friend of ours, it meant he was in, or at least associated with the criminal activity level of the mob and meant to be treated a certain way or could be trusted with certain things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you hear something like this, things like open-minded guests, open-minded, again, what does it mean to be open-minded when in an environment where so many illicit activities are likely going on out in the open? This is likely the type of language that would be used. Whether this term specifically is it or not, it is likely an example of the type of language that would have been used to describe people in this place who might be approachable to bring into the more exclusive area of the club where the really illicit behavior is going on. Whether that person is high level, wealthy, potentially a patron, or potentially being targeted for victimization. Either way, you're going to use certain language like this to identify people to be exposed to that part of the club and that type of behavior. And I think this is an example of that.
Don't know what to make of that, but when you look at that through the lens of other lived experiences of survivors, already off to a weird start here. So there are actually some clips here that Jamie has included
all
that
this
we're
is
going to
in
watch
the Jamie Crawford
along with
article,
him.
by the way.
I don't know who this
so
is, but I believe that they're going to be
feel free to
talking
go check it
about
out.
the
I mean,
box.
you definitely should.
Take a look.
At one point, I emptied a condom on Leonardo DiCaprio, and the press took it and wildly distorted it. And on one night where I had peed on some famous people, that's Adam Lambert and Calvin Klein.
That's not me. I don't know what that is.
People went on whatever it is and threatened to come to the club with bats. And I thought, well, you're really missing the spirit of it. And it's so... She'd come with umbrellas. But you have to be a part of the experience to know what's going on.
Not one day goes by in my life without a verbal response. Oh shit. What the fuck? What is that?
So, I don't know where that clip is from, but yeah, describing peeing on Calvin Klein and Adam Lambert, emptying a condom on Leonardo DiCaprio inside of this club. And the thing is, I'm not against people doing what they want to in their free time.
This, I think, is an instance where I can provide a little unique context. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who've had experiences similar to mine, but I remember being in New York, and where I went to school nearby, there was a gay club. And we didn't go very often, but occasionally you went. The reason we didn't go, frankly, because drinks are so expensive there, but you would occasionally go. I was an adult student, by the way, I should mention this. I was a return student, so by the time I was at university, I was 26, pursuing my bachelor's degree. So I was able to go out and frequent the bars, local places. I mean, all over the city. But there was this one local club that we would go to, and it was just a fun, different thing to do. You got some girls with you. You go in there for dancing usually. It was not the most outrageous place. It was a gay club, but if you've been in the city enough, there's gay clubs and then there's gay clubs. And this was, your friendly neighborhood gay club. It wasn't that big of a deal. And it's more of an attraction than anything, frankly. And I remember they used to do like a drag show. And we were in there one night, and I was with my girlfriend at the time. And they pulled, and the drag queen is walking through the club, looking for people in the audience to pull on stage and do something with. And I'd seen the show a few times, and the drag queen did different things with different people depending on who was in the audience. And so it was kind of this spur of the moment thing. And it was always a really interesting show, and fun and high energy and whatever. And it was just something to do in the neighborhood. And I was there with my girlfriend at the time. She was a very good-looking, tall, blonde woman, and we were clearly one of the only straight couples in the place. I'm obviously a very straight man in a gay club sitting with a good-looking woman, and they brought me on stage and blindfolded me and put me in a chair and had all the girls in the audience come up and kiss me on the cheek, and I had to guess which one was my girlfriend. So the reason I tell this story is because it's a little bit outrageous to be caught in that type of environment. And a lot of people might go, oh, if I were in that position, I would have said no. I'm not. That makes me uncomfortable. I'm not going to do that. No. Then you're likely not the kind of person who's going to end up in that club to begin with, right? So, I'm a fairly open-minded guy. I have no problem going into environments like that. I have no problem, having a good time. And so when put on the spot in the moment, it's hard to go like, no, I don't want to do this. You kind of just go along with it to not be a party pooper. And that is just a small example of how things can go a little bit farther than you would have imagined or frankly even wanted. I wasn't necessarily comfortable being put into that situation. I was like, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm on stage in front of all these people blindfolded, and I'm part of this attraction. And so that's just an example of how all of a sudden you can be in a club like this, watching shows, whatever, and all of a sudden you're a part of the show in a very bizarre sort of way that you didn't expect. My version is much more tame on a much smaller scale. Again, this is the place anyone can go access. Anyone can walk through the door of that club. The box is a very different situation, but you can see how it kind of scales up from there, right? So we're looking through the lens of human behavior. Is it reasonable to think that during a show like this is obviously someone who is gender bending. I don't know what exactly the definition of this person's gender is or their identity, whatever. I don't want to get into that. Not my thing. Try to be respectful, but overall, I'm not going to put a lot of effort into it. This is maybe a person in drag, maybe someone who's trans or non-binary or something, putting on some type of show at this club and urinating on people or emptying condoms on people or whatever, right? And that's a very extreme version of what I'm talking about, but similar in nature at a high level. And so to me, this isn't that improbable. To me, I go, yeah, I could see that happening when you have a lot of elite people, a lot of extremely wealthy people, people with a tremendous amount of access to sex, substances, all kinds of things, right? How do you wow them? How do you do something outrageous to someone where the outrageous is everyday occurrence, right? So that to me really, it passes the smell test, right? I think it's definitely possible.
As long as you don't hurt anybody, nobody's getting hurt, there are no underage individuals involved, I'm pretty open, and I think you can do just about whatever makes you happy in this life. So if these guys consented to do this stuff, I mean, I'm not mad at that. Is it pretty strange? Yes, especially if it's in like a public venue in the middle of a party. I do think that's
why I take the time to explain this, because I agree it is strange behavior when you look at it through in a vacuum, but you have to really understand the context here to understand what's going on fully and be able to wrap your head around it and digest it in a way where it really makes sense.
A little off-putting when you look at a lot of these people's public images as well. Like, it's just hard to put two and two together and really imagine these people
their
doing
public
these
image
things.
is
but
BS.
Yeah, if
it's
you're not hurting
real.
anybody, I don't see exactly
carefully
like
crafted
it being
and
morally
orchestrated
objectively wrong.
to make them more
people are going to
marketable.
disagree.
That is
But
in no way,
the
shape, or
connections
form
here
the
are
way
what
someone
make this whole
behaves
thing
behind the scenes.
really suspicious.
And you know this because so many famous people have had issues with substances and stuff like that. They're obviously not marketing that, so they're not going to market this type of behavior either.
Suspicious to me. I'm going to continue with what Jamie wrote. Emily Blunt and Jimmy Kimmel, Logan Paul and KSI, and Adam Friedland and Harry Sisson have all talked about the club and its second location in London on talk shows and podcasts while alluding to the debauchery that goes on at this venue where the rich and famous flock. Jude Law, Josh Lucas, and Rachel Weisz together made up a celebrity advisory board at its inception. And then you got a picture here. Unfortunately, I love Jude Law as an actor, but here's Jude Law in this photograph, pictured with Simon Hammerstein, the principal proprietor of the Box Club. And right in front of them at Wimbledon, you got Prince Andrew, which is
the famous Prince Andrew.
Very, very important figure in the Epstein story. But Jamie continues. In researching the Box and its ties to Jeffrey Epstein, the intimately interconnected social network that links and surrounds the notorious nightclub and the infamous Predator has now been mapped out like never before. The Box serves as a node in this network from which to glean new insights about the inherently shadowy world of what Congressman Ro Khanna has aptly branded the Epstein class. The recent release of the Epstein files show that Epstein went to the Box and got VIP seating at least twice after his release from prison. So Epstein went to this club, was treated as a VIP after he was convicted of hiring kids as prostitutes, minors. On September 14, 2010, he was able to sit at the exclusive Hammerstein table, and on December 2, 2014, he was again put on the VIP list and arranged to bring 3 others with him. So checking this out, I looked at these earlier. These are the actual emails. You can see the EFTA number there. Someone wrote to Epstein in 2010, "I'm going to try sit in the top right balcony, the Hammerstein table, see you later." Epstein says, "I'll be there at 9:30, is that good?" Subject is the Box tonight. And then whoever wrote this back to Epstein that was redacted says, "Well, seems okay. Who knows if they will start on time, but they look pretty organized. Your seat is secure at my balcony. Looks so cool." So that's Epstein going to the Box in 2010. Here's the other email. The subject is forwarded Velvet Night at the Box. This person, Paula Heil Fisher, with an email redacted, writes to Epstein and says, "Hi Bear, haha. Regarding Blank's performance at the Box on Tuesday, it starts at 9 p.m. I will be there earlier, but she says if you want to come, she will put you on VIP list and we will have a table in the front somewhere, so just let me know. Paris is gorgeous all lit up for Christmas. Leaving tomorrow though and back to New York City. All good with you, XO." And Epstein says, "Yes, I'll come. Tell me the time. I will bring 3 with me." And then this Paula woman writes back, "Okay, I will find out the time to arrive before it gets crazy. Get back to you, smiley face." You can see that Epstein, after his very, very public legal troubles, grappling with hiring for prostitution, after he's convicted, sentenced, serves prison time for that, he's still openly invited back as a VIP at this club to be seated in the very front, and he's allowed to bring people with him. So I find that to be...
Yeah, I think it's important that he's calling this out. We should call it out as well. Like, what does that mean? That means that people at the club are okay with this type of behavior or condoning it. They're maybe not openly condoning it, but they are accepting of this. I don't know how I want to say this. Right? Again, allegedly for entertainment purposes only, but if you continue to affiliate with someone who has been credibly convicted at this point twice in their life of this type of crime, you are essentially saying, without saying it explicitly, you are implicitly saying this is acceptable, right? So if you have a friend who's been convicted of something like this, you are essentially condoning their behavior if you continue to associate with them. They may be your best friend your whole life, but if your best friend is convicted of PDFing someone, PDF behavior, then you need to cut that person off, right? Like, if that's a moral of yours, right? There are certain things you can do that you should draw the line in the sand with people. And this is clearly one of them, 100%. So for the club to continue, or anyone who's continuing to associate with Epstein at this point in his career, is highly questionable. And for the club to allow this to happen, especially to someone like Epstein who seems to be frequenting the club, who seems to be a VIP member, it really brings into question the ethics of the people who are running the club, which is establishing a foundation for further claims that I'm assuming this article is going to go into, right? So I think it's important to register.
Pretty strange, but Jamie continues. A February 2014 financial report in the Epstein files shows that a total sum of over $30,000 was paid simultaneously across the trust funds of Martha Hammerstein, Patricia Benner, and Peter Mathias, who are all first cousins of Simon Hammerstein. So here's that financial report. You can see it's marked confidential. And yeah, I mean, there are payments going out here. Peter Mathias Trust, Patricia Benner Trust, and Martha Hammerstein Trust. And Jeffrey sent that right here. It's about a $30,000 payment to them. And they're the first cousins of the guy who basically...
Just want to look at this a little bit closer. So we're looking at Bank of Private Banking Pacific Coast. Okay, what is this? Incoming/outgoing wires, checks, and ACH report. I'm not entirely sure what ACH stands for. Additional info, beneficiaries, issuer name. Okay, description. Okay. Okay, so we have... Got it. Account. Okay. Description. And additional info, and then beneficiaries and issuer name. So on the right are the beneficiaries. Okay. So the reason I'm looking, I want to look at this more closely is because you have to understand the financial document. And I'm by no means an expert on financial documents, but I do have a little bit of experience. I did work in commercial real estate for a little bit, and was working closely with income statements, P&Ls, doing some real basic financial analysis. Again, far from an expert, so someone out there can maybe school me on this stuff, but a positive number and a negative number are, what's the word I'm looking for? What they mean can mean different things depending on what the document is, right? So you need to understand if this is ingoing or outgoing, right? And it's frankly hard to know, just based on what I'm seeing here, without further knowledge of this type of document. And I don't have any experience with this type of document because it says incoming/outgoing. And the beneficiary, this would lead me to the conclusion that this is money going to the person in this right-hand column, which are those Hammerstein trusts, which it does range in over $30,000 to Hammerstein, Peter Mathias, Patricia Benner only got $1,100, but Martha Hammerstein got $15,000 almost. Peter Mathias Trust got almost $16,000. I think that's what it means, because it's saying beneficiaries, issuer name. It could be money incoming, though. I guess is the point I'm making. Is it's a little bit difficult to know without a better knowledge base on this document. Is the point I'm trying to make. I was hoping I could come to a better conclusion looking at this more closely, but I don't know enough about this document, and there's not quite enough context here for me to be totally confident in that. But I'm seeing an account number, and I'm seeing a description, and I'm seeing additional info, and then I'm seeing beneficiary's issuer name. The fact that I'm seeing an account number and it's labeled incoming/outgoing, this could just as easily be incoming monies. Like if you think about your own checking account statement when you log onto your online banking, like incoming money in that account is a positive number. It's only outgoing is negative. So this to me is ambiguous, frankly. I'm not confident really what this means, whether or not they received the money or they gave the money. That being said, there was transactions happening between these parties. So I'm assuming these are accounts associated with Epstein. And these people are either giving or receiving money from Epstein. That's a fact.
And pioneered the box. So you've got a financial tie right off the bat right there as well.
Yeah, that is a fact again. So I'm getting a little bit lost in the details, I think. But what the article is trying to establish here is a financial connection between these parties, between Epstein and some of the founders, who those founders are Martha Hammerstein, Patricia Benner, and Peter Matthias, all first cousins of Simon Hammerstein. So they have some type of financial relationship with Epstein, the cousins of the guy who runs this club.
In another file, a redacted individual was emailing with Epstein's assistant, Leslie Groff, about a date with the Box Club owner at the venue. Talking of the show they saw at the Box, the unidentified person said, not sure how, if to recommend it. An article said it was a combination of Eyes Wide Shut and The Shining. I could see some elements.
Eyes Wide Shut, I think everyone's pretty well aware of that one. It's pretty explicit in what it's talking about. It's some type of Illuminati style SEX party. But if you're not aware, there are conspiracies around Eyes Wide Shut that certain elements of the film were removed without, what's his name? His permission, the creator, the director. God, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick. His first name is Stanley. Yeah, supposedly also did the moon landing, if you're not aware. But he did Eyes Wide Shut, it's his last film. He died, I think, before it was released. There's a lot of conspiracy wrapped up in that one, and supposedly certain scenes, or something like 13 or 18 minutes or something, was removed. There's also claims that there was supposed to be a narrator in the film. He's had narrators in pretty much every other film, and then this is the one that he didn't, so the narration was removed, which would add a lot of context to the film that we otherwise don't have. And supposedly these things were removed because it was too explicit in exposing some of these elite activities, right? Activities of the Epstein class, shall we say. Part of that conspiracy, wrapped up in part of that conspiracy, is a scene towards the end of the movie where Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, who are the main characters, are walking around a toy store with their daughter, and they're sort of talking. This is the final scene in the film, and their daughter kind of walks off. And it's not totally explicit, but there's two gentlemen in trench coats, older gentlemen in trench coats, that are kind of walking on either side of the little girl. And the idea is that they're taking her away, and that in order to get access to this elite level, this elite class, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman basically had to give away their daughter to this club, to these people, and now they can be a part of the crew and, you know, live at that elite level. That's not confirmed. It's just a conspiracy. Not a conspiracy, it's just a theory really about the film. Similarly, The Shining, there are interpretations of that film that the whole instance of Jack becoming possessed and seeing the dead and all this stuff, a lot of it is a metaphor for him essaying his son. That's the one interpretation of that film. So the reason I bring that up is we have a quote, a specific quote from someone talking about this club, saying it is a combination of, not sure how / if to recommend it. An article said, talking of the show they saw at the Box, right? So the Box now puts on different types of shows, right? This particular show, Epstein's assistant is talking to someone. Someone says the exact words are, not sure how / if to recommend it, ... An article said it was a combination of Eyes Wide Shut and The Shining. I could see some elements of those, but there were other stranger things. So this is someone quoting an article. They chose to bring it up. But the point I really want to make here is that there's a through line again of essaying children in both of those films. And not necessarily explicitly. Those are interpretations. So that's not what either one of those films is about on the surface level. But if you're an educated person, especially around the arts, you are probably at least loosely aware of those underlying themes. Again, back to that coded language. Is this an example of that? I don't know, but potentially.
There were other stranger things. So once again, this is to Leslie Roth, Jeffrey Epstein's assistant. We don't know who sent this. But yeah,
so
very much appreciate it. If you go out with the Box Club owner, hope you have fun. It's a theater performance I suggested for tonight's date. If it's a great show, I'll let you know. It's a combination of Eyes Wide Shut and The Shining, but there were other stranger things. So to remind you guys, if you're not cued in, Eyes Wide Shut was Stanley Kubrick's penultimate, or I should say ultimate, his final film. And it's about like basically the Illuminati and secret societies and weird sex rituals, and it's a very erotic film. But I mean, you guys will recognize this. These images are posted all the time by conspiracy people online. This is like Eyes Wide Shut. You know, all these people wearing creepy masks, doing these weird rituals and avant-garde sexual performances as a part of this secret society, doing weird initiations. The film has Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. There's some weirdness behind that film too. Stanley Kubrick dying right after wrapping production, and people think there's a whole conspiracy there. But for someone to describe a club as being a mix between Eyes Wide Shut and The Shining, a movie about secret societies and rituals and sex parties, and a movie about a guy who goes mad and tries to murder his entire family with an axe because he's being tormented by ghosts. What the hell do you make of that? And then you have Jeffrey Epstein being involved with...
Again, to me, I think it's more about those underlying themes, which, you know, the gentleman at the Conspiracy Files channel may not be aware of that. I love, you know, this conspiracy stuff. I've been in and around this scene for a long, long time. So if you've been around long enough, you're going to get exposed to Eyes Wide Shut and the conspiracies involving Stanley Kubrick. Because he's also did 2001 A Space Odyssey, which supposedly the graphics was so good, NASA decided to use him to fake the moon landing. So Kubrick is a name that gets brought up quite a bit, and his films are pretty good, frankly. I think he also did A Clockwork Orange and some other ones, but Eyes Wide Shut is the most explicit rendition of the, you know, so-called Illuminati that we probably have in film. Or maybe the most prominent, done by one of the most prominent actors of all time. And again, I think the through line here are the underlying themes of the essaying of children. That's what's really, to me, jumps out immediately, right? Then maybe that's not what this person was trying to say. Because, yeah, the box people are clearly mimicking Eyes Wide Shut. That's obvious. Or Eyes Wide Shut is mimicking other real life parties. In my intro, I have a clip of an actual party, I think from the 70s, that the Rothschilds put on, where this is, I think, the genesis of the mask stuff, or at least the genesis that the public is aware of. There was a famous party, I believe it was in the 70s, could have been the 80s, I'm not sure. Could have been the 60s, I don't know. I have to double check. But a famous party put on by one of the Rothschilds that you were asked to wear masks and come in costume and all of this stuff. And a lot of the people wore very bizarre costumes. And in my intro is a picture of the Rothschild, the couple who put the party on. And it's an older gentleman, and next to him is a woman, like a goat's head or something like that. Famous Rothschild party. The Surrealist Ball in 1972. And I believe this is the genesis of the Eyes Wide Shut mask, the Eyes Wide Shut parties, as they get called often. This is the genesis of that sort of narrative. And Eyes Wide Shut clearly mimicking that, and the box is clearly mimicking Eyes Wide Shut and the Rothschild stuff, and it maybe comes from somewhere else that we're just completely unaware of. But as far as I'm aware, the Surrealist Ball is the first instance that we have of this mask stuff. And that's a very surface level interpretation of Eyes Wide Shut, the movie. So, and the box, just looking at the article of J.B. Crawford, at the very top is Simon Hammerstein with a masked guy that very, very reminiscent of Eyes Wide Shut stuff. So it could just be that this performance is along those lines, and then maybe someone murdered someone with an axe. So it could be very much innocent, have nothing to do with essaying children. But to me, it's very interesting that the two films you chose are those two, and there's not necessarily popularly known interpretations of both of those films that include the essaying of children. All of this which could easily be discarded as coincidence, except when you include the fact that this is involved in the Epstein story. Now it becomes thematic to me and potentially indicative, again, of some of that coded language type stuff. Again, part of the culture that's surrounding this Epstein class of people.
This club in whatever capacity as well, it just starts to get weird. And as you can see here, this is a photo taken at the box. I don't know who these two women are, but this is Simon Hammerstein, the guy who started the club, and this is Jude Law, the actor. I don't know if you guys know Jude Law. I'll show you guys. This is Jude Law. He's been in a lot of really great movies. I love him as an actor. So I was kind of disappointed to see all of this. He's not only involved heavily in the club, like he was as an advisory board member, meaning
I think this is an instance where nuance is important. Just because someone is involved with this club doesn't mean that they're involved in certain types of behavior, the Epstein type of behavior. So there was another gentleman, Josh Lucas, who's another famous actor. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Rachel Weisz, who I know her most from the Mummy movies, the original Mummy movies, with Brendan Fraser. She played Brendan Fraser's romantic co-star. And just because they're involved with this club doesn't necessarily mean that they're involved in the more illegal activities, the PDFing, the Epstein stuff. However, in the case of Jude Law, I will say his involvement in this club is, shall we say, strike number one. And then you see him at that other event, again, with this Hammerstein gentleman sitting next to Prince Andrew. There's another strike, right? So birds of a feather flock together type of a situation. Just because you're in the orbit doesn't necessarily make you guilty by association. But when you're consistently in the orbit of these people, across different venues, across different events over the course of many years, now it becomes highly suspicious. The nuance is important though, right? We haven't seen that same evidence for someone like Rachel Weisz. So just because she's involved in the board doesn't mean she's similarly guilty. Not saying Jude Law is guilty, all alleged, all for entertainment purposes, but Jude Law, certainly, I'd have a lot more questions for someone like Jude Law, being that we've seen this pattern of behavior over multiple instances. We have yet to see that from Rachel Weisz. So nuance is important.
some decision-making power within the club about whatever it would be, the atmosphere, the things that go on there. But here he is wearing literally what looks to be like an Eyes Wide Shut style masquerade mask at the club itself. If you think that's weird though, this just gets so much weirder. So, Jamie continues writing, Epstein was arrested on July 27th, 2006, which just happened to be the same date as the very first photographed private event at the box, when Simon Hammerstein previewed the venue for family and friends, including Epstein's associates, Dr. Henry Jarecki and Nicholas Jarecki, and Diddy's mentor, Clive Davis. Clive Davis just died the other day. He's got some allegations to him, but here's Simon Hammerstein right here, the proprietor of...
Talked about that earlier. Who taught Diddy? Clive Davis. This Clive Davis character is someone whose history is worth looking into, and frankly, we'll probably look into him at some point for this segment of content for the show. For the channel, I think it's worth getting into his background.
Here's Nicholas Jarecki, he's the younger guy, and Dr. Henry Jarecki attending basically the opening of the box. And let's just take a look at this guy, Dr. Henry.
I don't know that this is the opening. He said that this is the first photographed event, so We don't know if that's the grand opening or what it is, but could be. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that I don't know that that's exactly what this is.
Jarecki Epstein connection. I mean, I could talk about him all day. Dr. Henry Jarecki, a prominent psychiatrist and billionaire entrepreneur, was closely tied to Jeffrey Epstein as both a personal associate and later the subject of severe and allegations by an Epstein victim. An Epstein accuser filed a lawsuit in 2024 alleging that after she was sentenced by Epstein, he referred her to Jarecki for psychiatric treatment. The lawsuit claimed Jarecki used the opportunity to and track the woman, but the accuser ultimately dropped the lawsuit, stating that she eventually came to believe that the doctor did not mean me any harm after reviewing the evidence. There are a lot of different allegations that this guy, Dr. Henry Jarecki, as you can see here, was involved in the Epstein network, coming from accusers. He's all over the Epstein files. A lot of people believe he was the doctor, or at least one of the doctors that Epstein sent victims to in order to receive medical psychiatric care before, during, and after his own son right here, Nicholas Jarecki. He's also been tied to Epstein. Should we just check him out as well? You can, if you're watching this, you can actually see the photos on screen. Yeah, he had a years-long friendship and correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein. Documents show the two men maintaining a chummy relationship. This is the doctor's son and Jeffrey Epstein, with Jarecki visiting Epstein in Florida and exchanging messages about socializing. In one 2009 exchange, Jarecki, the younger one, the filmmaker, he offered to fly a young woman to Florida on Epstein's plane, to which Epstein replied, "Bring her to Florida." Now, obviously, he's got a documented relationship with Epstein. Both of these guys had a documented relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And Nicholas had what did he say? Nicholas actually said, yeah, right here. And this is really damning to me. Nicholas Jarecki, on May 14th, 2009, when he was 30 years old, on that day, Epstein was released from prison after being convicted of procuring money for prostitution. And this guy actually emailed Epstein that day when Epstein was released from jail and said, "Let's hang out. When are the bracelets off?" And on July 23rd of that same year, Epstein sent a group message to a group of people that included Nicholas Jarecki, this guy we're talking about, and he said he was free at home, and Jarecki replied, "Welcome home, you crazy cat." And he asked him how they were going to celebrate him getting out of prison for hiring as prostitutes. So, another connection. These two guys are at the opening of the club. Need I say more? Anyways, Jamie continues.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you have a sort of birds of a feather type situation here with these Jarecki guys. Again, 100% allegedly. This is all for entertainment purposes only. Everything we say here is, not true at all. We're just having fun, make believe. But these two Jarecki gentlemen clearly seem to be highly questionable. Fact that the father seems to have had what I would consider credible allegations levied against him by someone who was involved with Epstein, is a known Epstein victim, who's then making credible allegations against this Jarecki gentleman, who then all of a sudden reverses their claim. That to me is a pretty credible allegation. Why did they reverse their claim? Could be a number of reasons. Could be threats, could be money, could be anything, right? Let's not judge victims, right? If you were in that situation and someone threatened your life or your family's life, what are you going to do? The idea that we're all these brave, self-sacrificing heroes is extremely naive. You've never been in those situations. I certainly have. I certainly hope none of you have. But to think that, to expect someone in that situation to go above and beyond their own self-interest is crazy and extremely naive. And if they took money or caved to threats, I think that's perfectly understandable. So we can't really discredit them for going back on their allegations. However, I think the original allegation, and considering that it's coming from someone who seems to have been trafficked or a victim of trafficking by at the hands of Epstein, it carries a lot of weight, right? So this isn't some random girl trying to get money off a celebrity claiming something, right? Like, again, not victim blaming anyone here, but I'm saying this is someone who's got a credible history of being, unfortunately, a victim of people within this type of circle, and it seems that they're being moved from one handler to another, and the allegation of that victim carries a lot of weight, in my opinion. And again, let's put that aside. The continued involvement with Epstein after the convictions are certainly damning to an extent, right? Like, that's worth questioning and looking at the people who were involved with Epstein post-conviction more closely, right? You are essentially, to an extent, condoning that type of behavior. And the Jareckis clearly did that because they're communicating with him literally days after his release, asking to celebrate. So that you have enough compelling evidence here to make these two characters very damning. Again, similarly to what we were talking about with Jude Law, the sort of birds of a feather type situation. You have a pattern of behavior across different instances of, different examples of evidence. I'm willing to say that these characters are highly, highly, highly questionable. And their involvement in this sort of Epstein class, these Epstein circles, should not be surprising at all. And if you know anything about Diddy's mentor, Clive Davis, the same can be said about him. Anyways, that's enough of me ranting on this stuff. We will jump into the part 4, the rest of this documentary next time. We're about 27 minutes in. So we still got quite a bit of video to make our way through. We're starting to pick up pace as I talk less. I'll try and talk a little bit less as we go on. But I think it's important, especially in the beginning, to set the groundwork for all this stuff. And as new arguments and new elements of the story are brought in, we need to place it in the correct context so that we can really wrap our heads around what's legitimate claims or what are impactful claims worth giving our attention to and what are less so. Anyways, all that being said, thank you for joining me on this one. A little bit longer episode today, probably about an hour long. Like I said, we'll jump into part 4 next time. Please like, subscribe, comment down below. What are your thoughts so far about any of this stuff? Do you think it's too wild to be real? Like, do you think these kinds of things are actually happening? Do you have any exposure to some of the lower end stuff like I was talking about earlier that can help us ground some of this in realistic context? What are your thoughts? Love to hear it in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back next time with another one. See you then.